Well, I'm a concert pianist, I'm a composer, and I'm glad to say I'm a represented composer with the AMC. I've actually written music all my life. Although my degree was in Melbourne, my career as a musician has really developed in England and then in other parts of the world because I live in London. It seemed to me that in Britain people knew very little about Australian, didn't even know there were any Australian composers, maybe opera singers or something like that. And I'd come in contact in my student days with people like Margaret Sutherland, who lived in Melbourne, and then later Peter Sculthorpe and others. And I felt that as a concert pianist, I could do something that was worth doing by combining the classical works that I chose and loved with works by Australian composers. I've toured in various countries around the world, playing in Warsaw at the Ostrowski Castle, which is the Chopin Society there. And it was a program which I played there in Austria and in Turkey called Australian Composers and the European Tradition. And so you had Bach, you had Chopin, and so on, but you also had Sutherland, and you had, of course I had Granger. But it was so glad to do it. And one of the things that happened at the end was a Polish man came up to me and he'd absolutely loved Percy Granger's Colonial Song. And he said, that music, he said he wrote it for his country, but it's the way I feel about my country. It was something that I felt I was in a position to do if I would make the effort. And that, of course, immediately brought me in touch with the Australian Music Centre. For me, the idea of learning and choosing and learning and promoting Australian works. So when I came, I'd come back to Australia regularly and I'd always visit the Music Centre in Sydney and see what was there and so on. And this just was part of my life. 25 years later, when I had a massive discovery, really, of Granger's music, and that led to a lot of research, a lot of recordings and so on. But I thought, if we're trying to promote Australian works, probably a competition is a good idea. That was the launching of something called the Performing Australian Music Competition. And it was a question of getting patrons, it was a question of getting people to donate prizes. All this took place in tandem with the Australian Music Centre in Sydney because John Davis was an absolutely tremendous colleague. For that first competition, the Guildhall let us have 4 days for the preliminary rounds. And then we had the grand final at Australia House. And the second competition in 2008 was the Royal College of Music, which has a great link with Australians. Many Australians studied and worked there. They gave us 4 days in their hall. And John Davis was there. I remember him looking, he was pretty gobsmacked actually, because we heard 80 Australian composers over those competitions. 80. I think that there has been a trend to concentrate on the glories of what we are doing now, and people don't go back and avail themselves of the rich nourishment and wealth of ideas that have grown up over many centuries. That understanding of the past, for me, is absolutely crucial. And there are things there in our past which are very precious. And I think as musicians and as an art music community, we will gain from having that link in what we're doing now. That link, I think the Australian Music Centre could have an absolutely definite strand of we respect those who have built up our music in this country, and we are going to bring to light some of the best music that they produce, and we're going to think about it and comment on it, just sort of let it wash over. I think that would be a valuable thing.